All right. So we were talking about a paradigm shift and science and how you evaluate scientific data. And I'd said that we use probabilities and we use statistics. Now, there are two different sort of ways of using statistics. You can gather data and come up with sort of the average of that data, and you can say, well, in general, this is the effect we have. It's a highly quantified kind of a measure where you have conditions on and concentrations, or X and Y axes, and you come up with the midpoint. And so the midpoint is called the mean, sort of it's the average. And then you can also, so that's a very important factor in statistics. And then another thing that you can do, and I think we'll do it in lab, depending on, we have a somewhat shortened lab. We normally do a lab where we look at some simple statistics and calculate some simple statistics. And one of the things you do is you develop what we call a regression line. And you can see data, and let's see if you can see this well enough. If you look at the numbers here, they're kind of going up. They're going up across the graph. And so you can say, well, if I look at that path of those data points, I could draw a line down through the middle of that, and I could make a prediction about what level we'd be at based on the values on the X and Y axis. And this is called a regression line. We'll learn a little bit more about it in lab, if we do that lab. Okay. All right, so we have some slides in here that are dealing with how to tell if science is true or not. And in this day and age, I think truth, we really need to try and be analytical and deal with things in a truthful manner. And so there are some ideas here about how to tell if a claim is false or not. Sometimes I mentioned that people really want their ideas to be true. And so some cases we can talk about bias. That's the first example. Have the sources of information been verified? Or is it just something that someone is quoting that they haven't verified that it's actually true? What is the position? What is the consensus of science? In general, we don't have that many paradigm shifts. So, and if you do have a paradigm shift, you better be showing some hard data and letting people analyze it. And if you aren't, it ain't true. It's baloney. So what is the position of the scientific community? Consensus. Is it consistent with other theories that it's having to mesh with? Is it balanced and logical? Who paid for it? Follow the money. That would relate to a bias, a definite bias there. Are there any competing arguments? So you should look at any claim in total. All right, so what about environmental scientist versus environmentalist? A lot of times an environmental scientist is sympathetic towards the environmentalist position, but he understands that we need to be dealing with things at a level of truth. And so while environmentalists want something for sort of emotional reasons, an environmental scientist is approaching it from the perspective of the science. And science is unbiased. All right, so what are we talking about? With all of this, when you're evaluating science or scientific claims, you need to keep in mind that you need to think critically. And now critical thinking is kind of thinking about thinking. Why do I believe? It's called metacognition. Why do I believe what I believe? Is it because I want to believe it, or is there really evidence out there for it? So critical thinking is analytical, meaning you look at the numbers, show me the numbers. It's creative. In some cases, you can come up with a brand new idea. It's logical. It's grounded in logic. If it isn't reasonable or logical, it's probably not true. And it's reflective, and that's that thing I mentioned just a second ago, metacognition, thinking about your own thinking. So it's important to critically evaluate our beliefs. You know, we don't want to be spouting some crapola, right? We want to be truthful in our understanding. All right, so we have environmental positions that are in place today, and so we can look at the history of how we dealt with, how we felt about the environment. And so what we can do is we're going to look at a few people going forwards and talk about how over time our attitude towards the environment has changed. And so we start out with a couple of people that are pragmatic conservationists. Okay, and so we have Teddy Roosevelt, and we have Pinochet. And so the idea, what happened was, way back when, there weren't any hunting laws or fishing laws, and there was like deer and other stuff to shoot and catch was like everywhere. And then it started becoming harder and harder to find. And people got to thinking, and they were thinking, well, darn it, maybe we should, have like hunting seasons, or say you can only take, so many deer or turkey at any given time because we don't want to kill them all, right? And so this is who we're talking about. We're talking about the pragmatic conservationist. And so what they did is they said, we need to manage our resource so we can use it. We don't care, it had nothing to do with, how good it was or anything. It was just like, we need the meat, the resources, we manage the resources for our own use. And we have a residue or a system of forest in the U.S. today that resulted from that. It's the National Forest Service. It's all about harvesting trees and animals and stuff like that. So if you want to go deer hunting, you go up there to the forest, Allegheny Forest up there, right? Or you want to go fishing for trout, you do the same. Or if you want to harvest trees and you're a tree company, you get a lease from the federal government, and they allow you to cut trees there because the National Forest Service is an outgrowth of pragmatic conservationist. Later on, people started coming along like John Muir. John Muir was the first president of the Sierra Club. There's a magazine, the Sierra Club magazine. And he argued that those turkeys, those blue jays, those deer, the beavers, or whatever it is, the trees, all of those, they have a right to exist for themselves. Not because we can use them. There's a lot of good meat on that beaver. No, not for that reason. It was because they have a right to exist. And so this was of the preservationist movement, and it was an outgrowth of ethical and aesthetic concerns. Another wildlife ecologist, Aldo Leopold, pushed for what they called a land ethic. And what he did is he planted trees trying to restore the health and beauty of the land. He also was one of these preservationist movement people. And what did he found? He founded the Wilderness Society. Now, there's another federal agency in the U.S. that is an outgrowth of the preservationist movement. It's the National Park Service. So if you want to go deer hunting, you don't go to the Great Smoky Mountains to go deer hunting. You'll be arrested. You say, well, there's a lot of bears there. I could go shoot me a bear. If you're in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, they will be really upset with you if you kill any of the animals, because the National Park Service is an outgrowth of this other movement, the preservationist movement. Then, later on, sort of from kind of my era, the 1960s and before, there was a lot of pollution. And there was a woman, Rachel Carson, you may have heard of her. She's from here, from this area. She's from Springdale. And she was worried about all of the pollution and the development of chemicals and the indiscriminate use of DDT to control mosquitoes. And she realized not only was it controlling mosquitoes, it was killing birds. Birds were dying by the thousand because they were just spraying this junk everywhere. There is a movie. You click on the link here. It's a shocking movie, actually, showing them spraying DDT on people in a swimming pool or people sitting around at a picnic table eating their picnic. It's not a good idea to do that. Rachel Carson wrote a book, Silent Spring, and she took on the chemical company on a live 1-hour TV show, and she was even quoted by President Kennedy. She made a huge difference in shifting people's attitudes to saying we should be addressing pollution. So she was addressing pollution. I'm going to keep going here for a minute or two longer because we only have 2 more slides. What came out of all of this is we realized that if you're going to push, we say we look at the world and we say we have strong science to support these claims. We say, yeah, it's killing mosquitoes, but it's also killing birds, and we can show you the evidence. It doesn't matter. Politics doesn't work that way. You have to have lobbyists. Not only do you have to have the scientists coming up with the data, you have to have lobbyists. And so there are a couple of activists, David Brower and Barry Commoner, who realized that it wasn't enough to just have the science. You have to have lobbyists involved. And so we have our crazy governmental system that we deal with today, which has lobbyists. You got lobbyists on both sides of the aisle, and it's just what it is. The last person I want to talk about is somebody we mentioned before, Dr. Wangari Maathai. She won the Nobel Prize, and the very first slide of this section, we quoted her. We had said that today we are faced with a challenge that calls for a shift in our thinking so that humans Stop threatening its own life support system. She won the Nobel Prize, not for that comment. She won it because she started a movement to plant trees and pushing for sustainable development. Trees, if you plant trees, you can harvest trees, right? I mean, trees grow up and become big trees. So that's a sustainable approach. You just harvest the right amount so that you don't eliminate the forest. So she won the Nobel Prize for starting this movement called the Green Belt Movement, and it's a worldwide movement promoting planting trees. All right, so this is the end of chapter 1. Next week we'll start on chapter 2. Have a good day, guys.